Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 29 of Everyday Inspiring Women. I am so excited to have my friend Sarah Anasari here. Yay, Sarah. I'm so excited. I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit further, but I just wanted to say, I just recently met you when we were at Dream Big in Scottsdale a couple weekends ago. And she's probably just one of the nicest, most genuine people that you could possibly want to meet. And I am fascinated because of personal reasons by what you do. And I think that you're such a powerful coach, and I just can't even imagine the transformations you must be able to witness doing your job. So you guys are all so excited. Like, what does she do? Okay, so
it's mystery.
Tell me more. So fill in all of the gaps for me, Sarah, please.
Well, thank you for having me, Jess. The feeling is mutual. We met each other and I'm like, have I known you my whole life? Is this
right?
Is this the first time really we're connecting? So I'm really happy to be here with you and your followers. You all are lucky to have someone like Jess who's telling it like it is. My name is Sarah, she mentioned, and I am a career transformation coach and a women's leadership coach. So I'm going to be honest, I made that title up. Like in coaching, it's really interesting, right? Where you all just get labeled coach and we have to figure out what is it that I really desire to help people through via the skill of coaching. And when I started my coaching career after a 7-year career in marketing and brand management, I just said I'm a life coach, and I was like, who needs some help? And so got clients that way. And what I ended up finding was, and I think our clients mirror us often, but the people who were coming to me were saying, I'm not happy in my career. I feel stuck. I feel stagnant. I know I'm supposed to be doing something really big in this world, and I just can't figure out exactly what it is and how to make it happen. And strangely enough, that was my process. I left my corporate job. I had to fire myself. I was telling Jess as we were getting ready for this podcast, because no one would fire me because I was a good employee.
Curse.
It is in some ways, right? Especially for those of us who are risk averse, right? And we're like, I know I need to make this leap, but God help me. I can't push myself off the ledge. So it took 3 years to get the courage to do that. And I spent a year kind of tumbling around trying to find my purpose and came into coaching. And now, funnily enough, that's what I help people through. And it's a very deeply important thing to me personally. I had always had this feeling of like, I'm supposed to be doing important work in this lifetime. I couldn't explain it. I just knew that. And there are very few things I feel certain of in life. But every once in a while, we get these whispers or these thoughts or streams or themes in our life. And you're just like, that just sounds like the truth. And it's not from a place of like, I'm special. It's just like, I know I'm not supposed to just be sitting around here. And that's what being in my corporate job felt like. I worked for an amazing company, the smartest, most genuine people I had ever known, was doing work I really enjoyed, but I wasn't on fire about it. And there came a point where I wasn't jumping out of bed in the morning. I was just tired. And I remember really knowing it was time to go when I used to do a ton of recruiting for my company. And it was like the part of my job, strangely enough, that I loved the most, because it took me into a true sense of gratitude for the work I was doing. And I would tell people about it, and it felt very real and authentic. And I was like so excited, and also being very in a state of awe of like, whoa, I'm on the other side of the table bringing people into this organization. Like, how did I even get this privilege? But recruiting season came up at one point, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't tell people to come here because I don't want to be here right now. And that's heartbreaking, right? Like, I think for me it was, where I'm like, oh no, what happened? Like, what just happened here? But it was kind of my push of like, okay, if you can't do the thing you loved the most, you got to go. so I'm circling here, but I just share that background because I think there's probably a lot of people listening who are awesome employees, who are doing work they like, who are getting a good paycheck, who feel safe and secure. And also there's probably a part of your spirit that's going, hello, what are we doing here? What are we doing here, lady or sir? man, what is going on? And one of the things I think that can come up for us, just I don't know if you felt this before, is like, who am I to think that I could do anything important? Or who am I to not be grateful for what I already have? I'm not that special, right? Those were some of the things that were going through my mind as I was in this moment of like, can I even leave a good thing? Is that okay? Am I allowed to do that?
You and I were talking about this subject when we were in Arizona, and I forget if it was you or me. One of us was really started to dig in a little bit about guilt, and I don't think I had thought about how much guilt someone would feel in a job, like you said, in a good job with a good paycheck, for a good company, and the guilt associated with not wanting to be there after 7 or 15 years of employment.
Yeah, I think guilt is a cop-out. I'm just thinking about this now because I don't think I've thought about this deeply. I think it's a defense mechanism. It's like the guilty mom thing too, right? I'm not a mom, but I get that. I'm like, oh, it's coming in my future. I can feel it. But it's a little bit of a cop-out because it puts us in a space of shrinking. Like if I feel guilty, then I'm not in action. If I feel guilty, I won't make a change. I mean, this is a new thing for me to think about, but I think guilt is we should be careful about that. Mm-hmm. Guilt is not the same as responsibility, right? Guilt is like shrinking, self-hatred. It puts us out of control versus I have a deep responsibility to take care of my family, right? And I want to make sure I'm on track for that. So a lot of these things that come up for us, especially if they feel yucky, like guilt it's like shame, right? Mm-hmm. It feels terrible. And we can just go into this swirl of, I feel guilty, I feel guilty, I feel shameful, and we just go down. I think an important thing for just saying this to myself right now and everyone listening to remember is when we feel those heavy emotions, it's just a pointer to go, there's something here to explore. And then usually underneath the guilt, if you use a coach or you do journaling or, talk to a therapist, there's something deeper, right? Guilt is actually more of a surface level emotion. And usually it would boil down to, wow, I'm really scared to take this leap and I don't know the impact it's going to have on my family. Or, wow, I'm really scared to take this leap and I also want to be really appreciative to the wonderful things this organization has taught me, right? Like, so I always think, question what you're feeling, not in that it's not an okay way to feel, but usually the first emotion we have is more surface level and then there's a root emotion underneath that. So we have to be very careful because our humanity will play tricks on us to keep us small. And again, it's so normal, but we've got to get really curious about anything that keeps us out of action.
I love all of that you just said because I think, and I love how you talked about mom guilt. And I that's usually a question that I'll ask because most of the women that I interview, are moms, not all of them, and women tend to carry guilt. I mean, it's like this, I think, a piece of armor we like to carry and be like, oh, look at all this guilt I have. it's kind of,
show me yours.
Yeah, right. And then, how can we be doing things and like really work through that? And I think that knowing that there is something underneath of it, that's really helpful because then it's like, okay, it's not, it shows up as guilt or it presents as guilt, but it's actually something else. Usually fear. Is it ever not fear? That's probably the bigger question.
In my own personal growth work and my growth and work with clients, it's always fear.
Yeah.
And I would say it's fear, and underneath that is like probably a worthiness issue, right? Am I good enough? Do I deserve it? All of that. But it's like, I joke, I'm like, I just want to create fear school. I'm probably going to do that at some point, where I'm like, let's just become masters at working with our fear. And not to say we are not allowed to feel fear. Like, if you're living a bold life, you're going to be scared 90% of the time.
True story.
You know, we talk about this thing of like, I want to be confident. I'm like, why are we trying to be confident? That's such a cop out to me, right? Like, cop out, like, confident is like, I've done this a million times, right? Confidence is a result of having continued action within some domain.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. If you're going to live, you know, you're just going to climb the ladder and you're going to do the same thing, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that is probably not going to feed you in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
Then go be confident. But if you want to live an expansive life, like, we've got to build courage, right? And courage, there's no prerequisite for that. Courage is, my heart is connected to this mission and I'm willing to do it regardless of the fear. I'm going to let fear just follow me through this crazy ass whatever mission I decided to be on. And I'm going to be very skillful in being with my fear throughout that journey. And to me, I'm like an efficiency person. I'm like, you know, if I can get, it sounds terrible, but like faster in my journey, that would be awesome. Because, you know, especially in creating my own business, I was like, half my effort went into being scared, right? Yeah. And to be wrestling with that instead of into creating this thing and having an impact on people. So I think the more we can just realize our patterns, our self-talk is just the underlying fear, and then we know how to work with it with compassion, we're just going to have way more impact and success. So yeah, I think we have to be, again, very careful about what standards are we setting for ourselves. And you know, I do a lot of work in women's leadership, and in the corporate world, you know, women hold 60% of the degrees in undergraduate and masters, and then we're 6% of the CEOs. What in the world is happening, right? And that's in the US. And there are many, many, many layers that are creating that dynamic. But in some of the research I found, confidence is like this topic that keeps coming up. Women need to be more confident in themselves. Women need to be more confident. And I'm like, okay, we need to have a conversation on what is confidence, first of all. Mm-hmm. Second of all, why is that the main factor? And I don't have all the answers for it yet. I'm formulating some work around this, but I'm like, what if we just decided it wasn't confidence? What if we just decided we needed to build more capacity to fail, to take risks, to not have our worthiness be directly correlated with our performance at work? How do we get out of this like good girl behavior? Tara Moore talks about it in her book, Playing Big, which is one of my favorite women's leadership books, of like, we were bred to be a good girl by our parents, to be nice. And then in the educational system, we did well because we shut our mouths, we raised our hands, we did the homework. And then many of us ended up in the corporate world, and depending on your organizational culture, we also like nice girls who do the work and put their head down, and then that caps out, right, once you move into higher leadership levels. So I think we need to be having a richer conversation around what's actually happening.
Do you have a microphone? You just drop it, like, boom, done. Boom.
I'm gonna buy like a inflatable one. I can do that.
I have one, but it's new and I'm not dropping it. But
do not drop your expensive microphone.
There's so much in there. I'm like trying to write, but like I said, I'm on this like a bit of a table, and it's like if I write too hard, it shakes the whole thing. But a couple things I wanted to just pick out of that. I take notes because I like to bring things up. The third word I wrote in your opening, I wrote courage, because everything you were talking about right in the beginning of your story that's the word that came up for me. So when then you turn it around and you're like, it's not confidence, it's courage. I'm like, of course it is, because it's yes. And I do talk a lot about that in Tribe. You know, what would you do if you had 5 seconds of courage? Like, I know Mel Robbins and the 5-second rule is huge. But we do think about that going, how can you be brave with your life? How can you have courage? And so I really, really like that. And then moving on to that point, and you talk about letting women fail. And you wonder why are we perfectionists? Oh gosh, I don't know.
Where did that come from?
Weird.
Like, you think all women, you know how diverse we are, that I don't have the data on how many of us are perfectionists, but geez, what happened?
99.999%.
It's not our fault though. Okay, this is the thing that is so interesting to me. I am a big fan of personal responsibility. Like, people say, like, it's not that we weren't wounded, but when we're adults, it's our responsibility to heal ourselves,
yes.
Something along those. And I'm like, yes. Amen. And a lot of the shit that we are currently dealing with as adults, take it all on. Like, I must have done something wrong. No, you were plugged into systems, right? Or you were born to parents who really did, bless their hearts, try their best, and they didn't know everything, right? So I think we have to be very careful about recognizing the larger forces that are at play. Also, because as adults, we have to create systems and structures and culture that are then going to not breed young children to be perfectionists like us, right? It was International Day of the Girl yesterday, and there was so much amazing conversation and cheerleading on social media, and I'm like, hell yeah. And we have to be very careful, because we're also starting to program women to believe that our worth comes from our achievements. And we're in a culture that's been doing that for a while. And that's really dangerous, because then we're constantly trying to fill our worthiness up with our achievements. And those things on the human plane of doing are never going to solve our worthiness issue, which is a spiritual issue. So it's all about nuance, right? It's about us role modeling these behaviors for them. It's about them having very clear leaders who are in popular culture and in the history books, and then to tell the story underneath that. Like, I want the storybooks for our girls that are like, here are all the hard things that happened. Here were all the challenges that were faced. Here was all the support and the help we got along the journey. Here's the stuff that we're still working on. Like, there's no end to these stories. Like, the end is when you die, right? In terms of this human life. And I think we're also breeding a culture of like these finish lines. Like, I got my degree. Okay, now I'm okay. Oh, I got this job. Now I'm okay. I got the salary. Now I'm okay. And then we're lost. We're like, why am I not happy? Why am I not fulfilled? Why do I still not feel like I'm enough? So I'm totally on my soapbox here, but especially for us moms or aspiring moms or people who have girls around them, like, we're responsible for giving them a very clear picture of what success looks like, and helping them define their own standard, and also being very clear about rewarding them for the process they went through to get to the moment that they might be in. So you got an A. I still remember this. My uncle, bless his heart, loved me so much. He was obsessed with me and my sister. I think I was in 4th grade, maybe 5th grade. And he said, Sarah, if you get A's, I'll give you $10 or $20 for every A you get, like something ridiculous, right? And so he attached a reward to a perfectionist result of getting an A.
Yeah.
And so I learned out of, again, all from love, right? I was young, so you take these big messages from this tiny little moment, right? It was 10 seconds. He probably has never thought about that again. No, that had a tremendous impact on how I lived my life. And he still loves the shit out of me, right? But so I learned, be perfect, get A's, be smart, right? Like, do the right thing, and then you'll get love. Because it wasn't about the $10. It was my uncle will love me, right? And so we have to not focus on the A. You're like, great job, high five, you got the A. Tell me, how was that for you? What did you learn? What do you want to do better next time? Who did you help, right? Like, we have to be very careful about the conversations we're creating. And I say this again as girls, but we need to say this to our sisters, to our coworkers, to our employees, to our partners, and most importantly, to ourselves.
Yes. I love all of that. And I think that it's so important. It's things that we learned as well, because that was a culture when we were growing up as well. Just, money for different grades. And my kids, actually, I got a comment from my oldest who's in high school, and she sees her friends having meltdowns, just complete meltdowns at report card time.
Yeah.
Because they're just the pressure, whether it's put on them or they put it on themselves, but some sort of culture's putting it on them. And she just is like, wow, okay, that, she can witness that. And because that's not our culture at our house. It's, here's my report card. Okay, let's talk about it. How do you feel about your report card? How do you feel about the work you put in? Are your grades reflective of the work that you did? Are your grades reflective of how you feel about a subject? Because
I love that question.
My girls, well, all three of them now that my youngest is getting into school, is like, they all have different strengths. They all have different passions. And I'm like, how can I, instead of my oldest, who math is not her favorite subject, we're like, let's get good skills in math because you need them. Let's work on that. And I'm going to pause myself and reverse a little bit. When she was younger, the term always came up. I'm using air quotes here. I'm not good at math. And I'm like, nope, that's not language we use. You are good at math. We just practice. That's it. How can we practice? And if you fail, okay, what did we learn? And it's hard to, like, raising kids is hard. It doesn't matter. But like, when it's a constant making mistakes, what are we learning? What are we learning? What are we learning from this? And then, so once we tried to really work on that script with my oldest, be like, I'm not good at math. It's like, okay, I am good at math. I try at math. I learn. And her grades improved huge just from one shift in language, and now she's like, am I done with math? Because we're done, right? I don't have to keep taking it. So, and she finished her highest level of academic math in high school. And she's like, I'm over it. And now I want to focus on psychology and language and arts. And I'm like, yes, because that's easy for her. It just flows. So just my point really being, the amazing shift you can see when you start, and I'm not perfect, like very far from it. So I make mistakes, like, my daughter will have a grade and I'm like, oh, that's really not good. I'll say those things of fine, like, but then it'll come back and we have conversations. But my point really being, when we start recognizing our language and how we talk about success and failure, and just starting to make little shifts in overhauling our language on what we're saying to our children. I have 3 daughters, so it's really, I only have that perspective because it's my life. But I mean, as a parent, just in general, I think it's really important. Did we get way off topics? I feel like we might.
Probably. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but I love it. I'm having so much fun. I'm sure we're talking about all the great things.
Oh, so important. So can you take me to that point in time where you fired yourself? Can you take me to that, like, I don't know, week point in that space in your life?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, rewind 3 years. It was about 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I call them the whispers of not this around the work I was doing. I worked for a large healthcare company for 7 years. At least 3 to 4 years of that, I had these undertones of like, what are we doing every day? Like, is this what we want to be doing? But there was a lot of momentum in my organization. So I would keep changing roles or getting promoted, or a new project would come on, or I would, move to a company across the country. Like, there was a lot of momentum in the work I was doing. And so every time I would feel those natural downs of like, okay, the excitement is worn off and now I'm in the grit of it. But then something new would come up. So there was, the structure did not facilitate me really diving into those feelings of like, what's going on here? What do I not like about this? Because I would keep getting these highs.
Right.
So The thing that really sparked the timeline for me, because I always knew, like, I was saving I was like hoarding money, right? I was like, I'm going to quit one day and I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I'm going to need to like have some financial support for myself. So there was the knowing and kind of these like actions of like, I'm going to set myself up, even though it was like barely conscious. And then my husband actually proposed to me. And it was in that moment where I was like, okay, you know, I'm a certain age. I'm going to want to start to have kids eventually. What am I waiting for? And, you know, I was very risk averse. So I was like, this is the best time in my life to take a risk like this. And if I don't do it in this little window, I'm never going to do it. And that was just, again, super clear in my mind. So and the universe is wonderful in supporting us and making our shift in some way. So I got moved on to the least desirable business to work on in the whole company. I went from like my favorite sub brand to like, what is this? Like, why am I working on this? And our budgets were getting cut. Nobody would like give me a meeting with upper management to fight for something. And so I ended up being in New Jersey. I was living in LA at the time. We're in New Jersey in the middle of winter with a boss who just, bless her soul, was lovely, but she drove me insane. Yeah. And didn't give me a lot of autonomy. Whatever, we don't need to talk about her. But and we were doing focus groups in a shitty, just like the least inspiring place you could think of, talking to men about their dandruff. I was literally, one of my products in my portfolio was like dandruff shampoo. And we're eating shitty food. It was just like, I was like, is this my life? Like, what is happening here? And I'm on the plane, and I was actually physically sick. So right before that focus group, I got a stomach bug and I had to just fight through it and show up. And I never get sick like that. And it was out of nowhere. I didn't have course. Anyway, so I'm sick, physically ill. Yeah. Then I'm on the plane flying back to LA, and I am feeling still physically ill. And I'm like, what is going on? So anyways, I decide time to numb out. I put a movie on, and I end up watching Wild by Cheryl Strand. Yeah. Okay. So I'm watching Wild. If you don't know that movie, it's really a book. So read the book and then watch the movie. But it's all about this woman going on a quest essentially to heal herself. Yeah. And I remember being like, just crying the whole movie, first of all, but being like, I am not the type of person who doesn't go on the quest. That is not who I am. I am her. I'm definitely not going to go hike in the way that she did, but like, I deserve to be brave. Isn't that interesting? I deserve to be a person who's brave. And so after I watched the movie, again, thank you, universe. I was all by myself in a row. It was like a late night flight on the plane. And I have no paper. I'm like, I have to get this out. You know, I'm like crying and like my energy is moving. And so I rip out of the folder we had used for our market research. So in the front is all the stuff about dandruff learnings. And then I had some blank notes in the back for notes, and I rip out a couple pages. I still have them. And I just start writing. And I'm like, how do I feel right now? And I wrote like probably 30 words. Small, tired, uninspired, off purpose, cranky, you know, like just all these words of like, who am I right now? How do I actually feel? And I don't know how I knew how to do that. I was coaching myself essentially through this moment. And then I go, but who am I really? And then I wrote down all the words of who I really was and what I really wanted to feel. You know, inspiring, excited, full of energy, helpful, loving, brave, courageous, kind, right? Like all the words that I knew were the essence of who I was and what I wanted to return to. And I'm like, whoa, there's a huge bridge between these two states of being. And then I was done with that exercise, and I kept weirdly, again, blank pieces of paper, moving myself into these different areas of questioning. And then I realized, okay, I need to prove to myself that I can make this leap, that I can quit. And so I wrote down all the support I actually had, all the reasons why this was a great idea, which by the way, I had a very strong inner critic voice my whole life, and especially at this time around leaving. So it was almost a revolutionary act to make space to prove to myself I could do it. I have the support of, my boyfriend, my fiance at the time. I had this much in savings. I have navigated transitions before. My family is the most encouraging family ever, and they'll be fine. I had a lot of guilt, a story about I had to support my family. I was the stable one. I was the responsible one. Me having financial abundance could kind of help them in the financial areas they were having problems with. So I was going to take a lot of that away. And so I had to, again, disprove a lot of these stories and these theories that I had. And then I started writing, what's my script? Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to leave. What is my script? And so I started figuring out, how do I explain to people what's happening? And so I wrote down the script. And so then the plane landed and all that. And I had a couple pieces of paper that were just my self-coaching. And it took me another 3 months to actually leave.
Mm-hmm.
I was, again, I think we talked about it in the space. I was waiting for someone to just do it for me. Kind of. I was like, okay, I have, there's a difference between deciding and taking action on your decision. So there was a 3-month gap for me in between those two states.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of fear that I had to then endure because I waited to take action. But it was the best I could do. And I didn't have a coach because I didn't know that was a thing at the time. And again, the universe helps you. So there was one day I was sitting at my desk, and again, I'm a great worker and I'm committed to my work, and I did great work till the very end. But there was this one day where I was like, I can't even focus. So I Googled, how do you write a resignation letter? I literally Googled it, and then I wrote mine, and it was sitting on my desktop probably for another week. And then I had a one-on-one meeting with my director who I was reporting into. And one of the agenda items was there was this training that I could go to. And so I waited until the very end of our hour-long meeting. I think I left 2 minutes for it. I was so scared. And I was like, by the way, I wanted to update you. I'm not going to go to this training. And she's like, why? And I was like, well, I have to tell you something. And then I shared with her why I was leaving. And so that was the final thing. And then I delayed again. Instead of giving my 2 weeks, I'm like, I'll give you a month. And I helped them end their business planning cycle. I was, I look back, I'm like, oh my God, poor woman. I was doing my best, but I was so terrified. So I kept delaying in these weird ways. But eventually I ended up leaving, and I left with a great reputation. I felt very much integrity in the way that I left that work. And part of it was out of fear, because I was like, what if I don't know what I'm going to do and I have to ask for a job in 6 months? I mean, truly. But also I wanted to leave on a high note. And this is a bit of a tangent, but what you'll realize once you've given notice, or mentally you've decided, is you take the pressure off of having to prove yourself at work, and you just do the work, and you actually return to a higher level of confidence, and you have more fun in the work you're doing, because you've taken off this intense pressure of, I have to be good enough. I have to prove myself here.
Right.
So not directly related to your question, but I think one of the things I work towards is, how can I always feel like that in my work? How can I continuously be pushing back the need for my work to give me my sense of worth, so I can just enjoy what's right in front of me?
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. It's so powerful. And I love that. Isn't it? Yeah, the universe is so funny. But of course, that's the movie that came on, right? And yeah.
Yeah, of course, right? You get exactly what you need. I think when you come to a space of actually being open, not wanting to be open,
Mm-hmm.
you get a ton of little support, pieces of grace. I remember my dad telling me when I was younger, he's like, grace shows up, Sarah. Don't worry. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? But, he went from serving tables at $5 an hour when my mom was pregnant with me to running, an IT firm. And there were and having a lot of entrepreneurial ventures. So he knew what it was like to be proactive in your life, but also taking these risks and having to kind of surrender to the flow of life. So he saw, and I I don't think he ever explained it to me in this way, but he saw these moments of help coming in at the moments you need it most. And I never saw that because my parents really, you know, we struggled in certain ways, but we always had our basics of what we needed. And so I never noticed how powerful sources outside of us are in our lives. And when I took this leap, I needed so much proof that I was supported. I didn't know I needed it, but all these things started showing up. And then all of a sudden I realized it was always there in my life. I just didn't really realize it. And now I look forward to it. I ask for help from wherever it needs to come from. And I do think that's part of brave living, is being open to receiving support, whether that's from your partner, from your friends, from your family, from strangers on the street, like to kind of some of these more universal forces. Because, you know, I was like a DIY girl. I was like, I got to steel myself. I got to do it all alone. No one's here to help me. And that was a very shrinking way of living. And it was a very heavy way of living. And so now I'm always trying to open myself up to like, who could help me with this? Or like, I don't know, who's an expert here? Or, oh dear God, I'm very stuck right. Ask for help, and I get it all the time. And that's available to all of us. Like none of us are special, and all of us are special.
Yeah, it's true. Asking for help, I think that's a huge lesson for us to learn. Going like, it's okay. I think we have this stigma that we're not allowed to, or something along those lines. And I agree with you. The more that I ask for help, the more I rise, but it helps other people as well. It helps lift them to help others. I like helping other people, so why wouldn't someone want to help me, I guess? It's kind of.
And it creates like a deeper level of connection. Like if I even think about what's underneath that, I think we're all so starved for real connection. We're like on our social media phones. We're all busy and running around, and we think we're connected because we see more of each other in some ways, but we are not connected. Like I remember seeing someone at an event recently. Oh, it was Val, our mutual friend Val, who introduced us. And I'm like, I'm connected to you because I see you on social media every day. And I saw her in person, and I was like, I don't know what's going on in your life. And I feel very bad that I haven't called you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we had that exchange, but there was a part of me that was like, you're not connected to her. You think you're connected to her, but you are not deeply connected to her. And whoa, if I multiply that across a lot of the important people in my life, we're all missing out, and it's not even registering. So I think in that asking for help or giving help, it brings us into a whole another level of deeply relating with each other, which right now I just feel like we've lost that art, or we've lost how much we bring that into our lives. I think that's maybe why I'm partially like, you know, it's not healthy, but I'm like, I'm kind of addicted to being a coach in some ways, because I'm in the deepest level of connection with people. When we're doing our work together, I am fully present, completely listening, in service, connected with all levels of myself, my mind, my body, my heart. And I get to just really be there, and the person gets to feel that. And it's a very powerful force. And I notice like on certain days I don't do coaching, I do kind of the business aspect of my work. I miss it. Yeah. And so my new growing edge is, you know, I've depended on my work for a lot in my life. It's like the segment of my life that I'm most deeply connected to, but it's also a bit of a cop out. And so now when I'm noticing I'm striving for connection, I'm like, go have coffee with your husband, right? Or like call your mom, you know, and stop relying on your work to feed these parts of you that, not that it can't, but why would that be the primary way you feel connection? It can give us that I'm addicted to it versus I just really like this, and if it went away tomorrow, I wouldn't need it. So I think maybe that's an inventory for all of us to do is, am I craving connection, and how can I do one thing a week that brings me into a space where I get to really be with a person and take off my masks, right? And take off the everything is okay and I'm fine, and really share what's going amazing, because we're not good at like being in that kind of a space with people. Why? And then also like, dude, lady, I'm struggling over here. I'm on the struggle bus with this one thing. What, can you help me, or can you just listen to me and help me see the things I'm not seeing in myself?
Yes. I love that. And I agreed. Like, I think that's like why tribe is so powerful for me too, because it's a space where people can, we encourage you to show up as your authentic self and take off those masks and listen to a story of struggle and success and vulnerability. And I had my first storyteller finish her story off with, I don't know what's next. And I'm like, oh, I loved it so much because I feel like, especially with storytelling, a lot of people feel like we need to tie it up in a bow.
And then the end. Yeah.
And I lived happily ever after, and not, and not that they do it that way. I'm being silly, but it's going like, and then it's kind of wraps it up. Like, because we're like, what's our closing? What's our ending? And she ended it with very real going, so this is where I'm at right now. I know, like, here's what's I'm facing, and I don't have an answer. And I have to, that's another hill for me to climb. And I loved it so much that she ended like that. Cause I'm like, cause that's real life. Cause that's what we're doing. Right. So powerful.
That is real life. And if we skip over those spaces, I'm actually just looking sadly at my Instagram to pull up this quote, because we like view those voids as this like, ah, I don't know what's happening. And that's a really bad thing. But again, and I was totally that way. And most days I still am that way. And also that is the richest space we can play in if we give ourselves permission for that. But guess what? Again, we're not programmed for that to be an okay space. People are like, do you need help? Can I solve it for you?
Yep.
Whoa, right? We skip over it instead of being like, what? That's awesome. Like, that's how I feel about my work when people are like, oh no, I don't know what's next in my career. I'm like, oh yes, you don't know what's next in your career. Like, if you can put yourself in a safe container to actively explore that, it can be one of the richest moments of your life.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you're in the fear or you're trying to go it alone, it's not fun, right? Like when it took me so long to do my transition, and I had so many sources of support and community, but it wasn't until I hired a coach that it felt less daunting. And then it slowly moved into fun and creative and exciting. So, whether it's grabbing I call it like your quit buddy. I actually had a woman who was quitting at the same time I was, and she was like, we got to like ideate together and just be in this moment together. Or it's a coach or a community of people who are in the same moment. We miss out on so much fun and joy in moments of uncertainty because we're just not used to it. And to me, the best way to quickly shift that is to be in community.
Yeah.
I found the quote. It's from Adyashanti, and it's, when you actually rest in not knowing, from that place, something new and creative emerges. It just arises out of that quietness, stillness, and simplicity. Not knowing is a very creative space.
I love that. Yeah.
And I think it's really hard for business-minded people to play in creativity because it's not how we work necessarily. Like, I would never have thought of myself as an artist or a creative ever for a second. But reinventing your career is a completely creative act. Yes, there's some strategy around it, but it's very creative if you're deciding that I'm going to use my career as a way to bring through a creative force in this world that's needed. And so it's, for me, there was a lot of unprogramming and reprogramming to allow myself to sit in a creative moment, which when you're in a process kind of a world, it's not your norm, right? It's not your autopilot. And so it requires you just kind of go, I'm going to try doing this a different way because the way I did it before got me so far, but for this next chapter, something new is required of me. And that is a very hard moment to be in of, I may not know how to do this part, right? Or the way I did all the things before and I created such certainty for myself, I might have to let all that go. I remember being at my first retreat with a group of female entrepreneurs, and we were doing eye gazing and like all this I call like the woo woo stuff. I'm like, what's happening here? I thought this was an entrepreneurship retreat, but ended up being mostly personal growth. Thank goodness, because that's required for any entrepreneurial journey. But we were doing some process and we were in a meditation, and I saw like a brick wall in front of me, and I saw it just crumble, completely crumble. And the words I heard were in my mind, which definitely didn't come from me because I wouldn't have said this, were, let it all go. Let it all crumble. You can rebuild it. And so I think there's a big process of unbecoming, of undoing, as we're moving into the next phase of our own personal evolution. And when we're taking on bigger work in the world, we have to add new dimensions to who we are and how we do things. And in the beginning, I think we have to let a lot of the old go to make space for the new. And then we move into kind of the integration stage. But I do think like there's a fear of like, if I unsteel myself, is my whole life going to fall apart? Right. And it's not, right? You might have to let some things go. It might feel a little scary for a little while, but you're not gonna fall apart. Maybe that's like too big of a claim, but like, fall apart in the sense of like, I'm just going to be a puddle of nothingness. You're right. Not. That takes a lot of work to really unbecome. But it's okay to lean back a little bit in your life. Like, Sheryl Sandberg, she's like, lean in. And yes, that energy is required in a lot of moments, but certain moments require us to chill the F out, right? And to actually lean back and go, what's happening here? Mm-hmm. Right? And to be in a more observing space and a more surrendered space. And for a control freak like me, like that was not easy.
Yeah, I feel you there.
You feel me? Totally. Anybody else in the control freak?
Probably not. I think no control freaks or perfectionists. So I think they're
definitely not listening.
Yeah. I think hands up across the board, right? And, thank you for sharing that. I think that's agreed. Like it's so important just in that space. There's another quote. I don't know if it's a quote, but it's like a talk that Glennon Doyle talks about being in the valley. And I adore her. And I think that's another resource for people if they're like that. It's essentially talking the same thing when you're in the valley and going, how do you enjoy that? And
oh gosh. Yeah. How do you enjoy that? How have you been enjoying that? I mean, I'm not interviewing you, but maybe I'm always like, when I do podcasts or I talk about these things, I'm like, how can I make this feel practical or like tangible for people? Because it can become very esoteric. And I remember me a couple years ago, I'd be like, I feel like you're telling the truth, but I'm not sure if I believe, like if every part in me believes you. So I'm trying to think of like, for me, how did I enjoy that valley? And maybe you can share too if you're open to it, but I just feel like the more like tangible we can make this, I feel like our stories help people sink into like, this isn't just lip service. Like this is
right. We're just not re-quoting quotes that we read.
We're just filtering all the I'm like really thinking for myself. I'm like, how did I enjoy being in the valley?
Right. So for me, for sure, I will not forget. It was when I was very new to the work, I was still not feeling. I was very, very numb to so many things, highs and lows, right? Because when you're numbing yourself, you're bringing the highs and lows to neutral. So there was just no feelings either way. And certainly as I dug in and I started to grow, I was still trying to really skip over the valleys. And I don't know what my natural my instincts, fight, flight, freeze. It's like flight, like run and hide. Typically I like to run. I like to hide. So those would be my instincts originally. So originally it was run, like flee. And then I started to kind of like, okay, I can't run every time I'm down here. But then running flipped to hiding. So I'm like, okay, I'm not gone. I'm still here, but I'm really, really inaccessible. Like no one's hearing from me. So I like Netflix and chill. So I don't want Netflix and chill to have a negative connotation when I talk about it, but my hiding, when I'm quote unquote hiding, not just relaxing and enjoying a movie, but hiding consisted of in bed, sheets to my chin, rewatching episodes that I've seen 20 times. That's how I know I'm hiding. When I'm not trying any, I just don't want to feel. That was numbing. I numb with food too, but I feel like a whole other conversation we could be having.
Oh my gosh, all the ways.
Mhm.
And in those moments, it's so, I mean, I feel like for my valleys, I'm like, what is my go-to pattern is I get overwhelmed. Like I dream really, really big. So I'm like, I gotta save the world, which is like so ridiculous thing. But I create really big plans very quickly. I'm a visionary, and I go on this high and I get all this energy, and then it's like a steep drop off, and then I freeze. And so then I backpedal, or I do the easier things in my business, or I'm like, the floors are dirty. Like, ask my husband. I don't like to clean. I only clean when I have to. But I'm like, oh, like the whole house will be organized. My OCD, gets reinvigorated. So that is a pattern I know I need to catch. And you know what I've actually learned though, is I just know that's going to happen. And I'm not going to try to change that that's my pattern, that's my thing. Cause I'm like, I want that energy that's going to bring me into this huge vision. And then I'm going to just know, and then I'm going to drop, and I'm going to need a beat to ground myself, because you know what? The energy I need to then go build and execute is a grounded energy. It's inspired, but it's not this excited, open, almost out of body experience that happens when you're downloading or crafting big visions. And so can I give myself permission to be like, I'm going to be exhausted after that happens, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's normal. Instead of going into my I'm overwhelmed pattern, which then spirals me into, I just say, forget it. I don't actually really care about that, right? That's also my pattern is, oh, I thought I wanted to do that, but really I want to do this other thing. And then it goes away until it comes back. And it's like, you're not done with this big idea, Sarah. You've got to push it forward. So again, I think a lot of this is like, listen, I don't have any hard, fast rules or rules. I don't know. Like maybe over this whole podcast, Sarah doesn't actually know. But that
was the title I was considering. Thank you.
Right? Sarah doesn't know shit. But she has a hunch that that feels very liberating, honestly, to be like, I don't know. But the magic of life is, how can I know and understand myself and compassionately work with myself? That's the secret.
That's what I think. Yes. It's so we must have known each other for a million years, because that's where I was heading.
Totally.
Because
I love it.
It totally was, because it was like the moment I realized I need to allow, instead of fighting what is. I'm a Byron Katie super fan, but like I was fighting what was. And what was me laying in bed with the covers to my chin, rewatching episodes of Netflix. And the second I made that one shift to say, I have to be here. I have to get to this point. And that's okay. My body needs it. And it's so not funny, but funny that the second I made that shift, I didn't want to Netflix and chill for a week anymore, because that's what was happening. I was hiding for a week. Now it's a day, maybe now. And the one thing I consciously do is the second I feel that retracting, I will choose shows that still can stimulate me. So like I watch Explained on Netflix. I'm a like huge documentary nerd. So I watch like Quincy. If you haven't seen Quincy, it is so good. I can't recommend it enough. And just other things. So it's like, so yes, I'm in bed. I'm quote unquote hiding. I'm retracting, but I'm also doing things that are changing some patterns of that behavior for me that I can. And a huge thing, and you said it, and I just want to reiterate it because it's so important, at least in my opinion, is that I'm done beating myself up about it. I'm done. I'm so over it, because I would sit in bed for a week and beat the living shit out of myself for a week. Well, no wonder I didn't want to get out of
I
bed.
get to enjoy one show. Like you're like,
Totally.
I didn't even get to enjoy that show. Like, what if it's like eating a bar of, there's a mindfulness practice of like very slowly eating one piece of dark chocolate and like spending like 5 minutes on it. And you're like, okay, when you're being with that experience, you don't need the whole chocolate bar. You just need the one because you were there for it. And I think it's that same thing of like, we don't have respect for recovery, right? We have the judgment of recovery. And so we ruin that experience. So to your point, it's not one show, it's 20 shows, right? Or whatever it may be. I think the other piece that I just really appreciate is like, I'm not going to be a slave driver to myself anymore. Like what? Like I'm like, who is this like demon in my head that's like, faster, keep going. Like, don't even go to the bathroom. Like I remember being in corporate and being like, I haven't peed all day. I have to pee so badly. Like what is going on? Yeah. But it's, you know, I was talking to my sister this past weekend. We had like one of our favorite like sister talks. And she's like, you know, Sarah, for you, I recognize it's very hard. I'm the achiever type in the Enneagram. If you love personality typing tools, this is the best one I've ever found. But I'm an achiever type, which is, you know, the way you create safety in your life is through achievement. And she's like, the culture is rewarding the way that you're operating. So some of the other types are a little off culture in some ways, but this is like the archetypical Western way of being a successful person. So no one is saying, honey, slow the F down, right? Or like, is this healthy? Or like, do you even like the job that you're doing? Like, what is your legacy you're trying to build? Like, what is happening here? Like, nobody questions you because you're just modeling what is good via society's standards. And the achiever type has a huge, like, whipping boy that's like, never stop, right? Keep going. Because I told my sister, I'm like, if I'm not doing, sometimes I feel like I'm going to die. Like, not in my head, like I'm going to die. I know that's not real, but energetically I get anxiety and I'm like, something's not okay. And I'm like, it's Saturday. Like, I know you're an entrepreneur, Sarah, but like, it's okay if you chill for a minute or you go do. The saddest part for me is like that programming has kept me from enjoying a lot of the relationships in my life and from prioritizing them. So, you know, I think, what is my point here? Notice if your family system or your culture isn't questioning what you're doing. And then you got to question yourself, not in a negative way, but just get curious of like, how is this weird thing serving me? And, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, it makes me feel worthy, right? But there's no end to it, right? Which keeps us in this like frenetic energy and this overachieving state. And then we forget to like go and turn to the side and be like, wait a second, what are all the other areas and dimensions in my life? And how are those things going? And for a lot of us, achievers are not going so great. Like our health isn't that great. Or we're over focused on health and we're doing the achiever thing there. Maybe we haven't found our partner because we haven't made space for it because we decided work was the most important thing. Or, I think about my friendships a lot and I'm like, man, I was a shitty friend for a long time. I didn't show up because I had a work thing, or I didn't call you because I was exhausted, or, and I look back and I'm like, those are my big regrets of like, man, what happened here? On the flip side of that, it's like, don't reject how you're built. Like, I really appreciate that I'm an achiever. Like achievers kick ass. Like we create major shit in the world because we're so driven.
Yeah.
And so it's not about rejecting it. It's just about how can I become a healthy version of an achiever? And part of that is like saying stop, shut the laptop, right? And it's also going, if I'm going to use all this energy, it better damn be for something that I deeply care about. Because I know I'm going to kind of maybe overdo it. So I better be overdoing it for something that I know I care about or that is going to make a huge difference in the world. So that was a long rant, but again, it's like nothing is ever one way, right? So really watch your achiever thing and also really celebrate it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I love that. Thank you. So what are you working on now? So we've talked a lot about how you got to this point, but curious, like, and some conversations you and I had when we were at Dream Big in Arizona. So what do you see is coming up, like themes that are coming up, or what's next for you?
I I feel like my big themes are about focus
Mm-hmm.
and boldness. And I am a nice girl who goes broad. I'm like a generalist. So this is it's a very hard maybe moment for me to be in. And all the stuff I really worked out on my internal way of being is getting inflamed right now because I'm growing, right? I'm actually moving out of my now new comfort zone.
Yeah.
So in terms of what I'm focusing on, I do a lot of different kinds of coaching, but the majority of it is around career transformation. So I was doing this one thing and now I really want to shift into something completely different, or I'm doing this one thing and I want to shift into a totally different way of being in this stream of what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that is not changing. I think I'm just recommitting to that and letting go of a lot of the smaller projects I had around it, which feels scary to me because a lot of them are doing some work with corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I won't do work there, but I think it's not going to be my primary focus. And that feels scary for me.
Yeah.
A very interesting realization I've had is I viewed a company as a source of security. They give me the paycheck, right? Not I'm a generative force of value and they respond to that,
Yes.
which was such a huge realization for me, and why I think being an entrepreneur was such a healing process for me. Was it became much clearer that I was generative because I was the only one there. So interestingly enough, I think there was still a belief that was still operating that, there's money there, there's security there, and I need to have that safety net. Interestingly enough, I looked at the value that I've brought in through the different segments of my business. That's the smallest piece, is from companies. So really funny, right?
Yeah.
So again, we have to always be checking ourselves. And again, it's not that I won't work with companies, because I believe a lot of people are in the right, sitting in the right desk.
Mm-hmm.
There's just some cleanup that needs to happen. So that's one thing. But the boldness piece is starting to really claim my message,
Mm-hmm.
which is around the idea that there is very important work every person is here to do, and work with, I call it like a capital W. So it doesn't need to be a traditional job, but you're here for a reason. I have a full trust in that. And there's probably, if you're anything like me, something holding you back from clarifying that, I call it your essential mission, and then stepping into it.
Yeah.
And I want to be a really powerful force to remind people of that, and then to break down the process of what that looks like for them. Because being on, I wouldn't even say the other side of it, but really having gone through a lot of those steps myself, I realized there's such tremendous joy available to us, such tremendous growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also pretty clear that there's a lot of cleanup we need to be doing on our planet right now. A lot.
Mm-hmm.
Environmentally, every single layer. And I know there are so many smart, driven, capable, heart-centered people sitting behind the wrong desk because they're scared, because they're numbing out and they don't know what to do next. And so I'm like, okay, I'll hold your hand, let's go. And I don't know what your work looks like. I just know you have it in you, and I want to help you get to it.
Mm-hmm.
So being much clearer, much bolder in that message, and also creating a sense of urgency, because the time is right now. I really believe that, from a universal perspective, God, whoever it is waiting on us to be like, wake up, people, wake up to yourself first, so that you can go do the thing that brings you the most joy. Mm-hmm. And it's usually what brings us the most joy is where our deepest gladness is, or our deepest sadness, or typically the intersection of the two. And I can't remember who said that, but to me that made so much sense. And my deepest sadness is being disconnected from our spirit, because I was that way for a really long time. Yeah. And my greatest joy is seeing people create beautiful things in the world. And so I want to help bridge those two things. So it feels to me very scary to put a stake in the ground. It feels very scary to me to assert a belief that there's not data against. And it feels very scary to say, I am one of many people who can help you through that journey. I'm terrified of that. Even though I have a lot of proof that I've done it myself and I've coached a lot of people through it, I'm still terrified because I know that you're going to have to go through a lot of hard things along that journey. And I have no control over how that journey goes, right? Like that, like, what do you have to give up, or what do you have to go face emotionally, or what things fall out of your life to make room for other things? That's scary to me because I'm a control freak. I want to control everything. And so I can't do that. I can create a container where we create contingencies and, we loosely control a very creative moment in your life, but I can't actually guarantee anything. I just can't. That's not really up to me. So I think that's where my big fear is can I communicate something I believe in powerfully, and also be very surrendered in the fact that, like, Sarah doesn't know, right? Sarah doesn't know all the things, and I can't guarantee you your dream life. Like, I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. So there's a lot of things in there. But what I would just say is, like, I'm scared too. I'm really scared too. And I think it's worth it.
Yes.
I don't really know what else we're supposed to be doing here, but deeply understanding ourselves and using our truest potential and fullness of self, authentic self, to go serve. I remember asking my mom when I was really, really little, I can't remember, maybe 5. I was like, Mommy, what's the meaning of life? And I don't remember her answer, but I would just remember from a very young age being like, okay, I'm here. What am I supposed to be doing here? Like, what is this game we're playing? And I still don't know the answer to that question, but those two elements of, like, can I discover myself and can I serve to the best of my ability, feel like part of that, the answers to that question, at least for me.
I love that. There's a point in time during that piece where you said something like, there's something more in you. Maybe you don't know what it is, but I have faith, and I will help bring it out of you. So, like, that's so your tagline. So if you think, I'll have to find it. I'll send.
Yay! I needed a new tagline.
Just because the way you said it, I'm like, yes, that's what you do, right? Because I don't know what you're here for, and you don't know yet. But let's kind of let's get you to that point.
Let's get curious, and, like, can we please have some fun in that process? Like, I don't think I had a lot of fun looking back. Like, I did, but I took that very seriously. And I didn't give myself, again, permission for that I don't know pause. And I look back to, why did it take me 3 or 4 years to make my leap? And it was because I didn't know what to do with the big whisper, the big knowing that showed up for me, which was like, not this, honey, right? Or there's something after this.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what do I do with that? There's, not to get too Cody again, but I was just looking back at some old posts I had done, and I saw this, I hope I have it, this picture from my sister, and a comment from my sister that I think might be helpful for people. And I feel like it's why the work that I do is, like, part strategy, part art. It's I don't know who the quote is from. I'll find it. But this person says, there are, it seems, 2 muses, the muse of inspiration, who gives us inarticulate visions and desires, and the muse of realization, who returns again and again to say it is yet more difficult than you thought. This is the muse of form. It may be then that form serves us best when it works as an obstruction to baffle us and deflect our intended course. It may be that we no longer know what to do. When we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And when we no longer know which way to go, we have begun our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings. And I mean, it's, like, just so gorgeous But I love the idea of there's the muse of inspiration, which to me was that knowing of like, not this, and then the muse of realization. And part of the muse of realization is bringing it into form. And I think that's where I kind of come in as a coach is, cool, you got the whisper. Now let's be in that unknowing and do some things to bring some clarity and wrestle with some things. So, and then we have to pull it down into form, which is take this really huge inarticulate vision and create some articulation around it, create some experiments, create the next couple small steps so that it's kind of like we land on our masterpiece without having had the vision of the masterpiece, right? Like we have an inclination, but we have to take these small steps to get there. And that's the, you know, the grittiness of realization, the grittiness of pulling something into form. And because I was a perfectionist, because I thought I had to know the answer first, I didn't know what to do with the inspiration that dropped in.
Right.
And I think there are many, many, many people who are in that moment of like, I hear something, but what do I do with this?
Right.
I'll tell one more story and then just shut up. But I remember being like, when was it? I had quit my job. It was 6 months in. And I had like tried all these ideas and started little businesses. And I was like, I'm in that moment of like, I'm lost. I don't know. And I think my husband was traveling, thank goodness. And it was late at night. I probably had a glass of wine at least. And I was like trying to come to my answer. And I remember taking out a journal and being like, oh, dear God, I sound like a crazy person right now. But I'm like, give me the answer and I swear to you, I will go make this happen. And I was like, I bet you I can channel. Like, I bet you I can like pull down some inspiration. And I have this crazy ass looking piece of paper that is just scribbles. It's scribbles. There is nothing. There is no form. There are no words. And I think, again, that was the frustration of like, I think that I'm supposed to have the answer, but I am not. I'm supposed to be in the inquiry. And again, as a perfectionist or someone who needs to know where she's going, I didn't know that scribbled piece of paper was a beautiful space to be in. And I didn't know who to go ask for help to pull that down into human form. So I took a lot of time doing that. I had a lot of coaches help me. And that's what I get to enjoy now, because I've built the capacity to be able to be in the space of, I don't know, but I'd like to figure this out for myself. And I'll have a lot of patience, but also be deliberately in focus and in action to make that happen.
Yeah, I love that so much. And yeah, it's like breadcrumbing and going like, okay, here I am right now. And then not knowing the next step, because sometimes it's like the next step isn't actually even revealed until you're in that space anyway.
The moment of it. You're like, oh, I'm in the next step. Whoa, it's happening.
Right. Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. Can we talk all day?
Yeah. I mean, this is my favorite thing to do. Talk about things I don't know about. Just kidding. I think that's like, we need to learn how to give ourselves more credit. I think that's the other piece too, right? Where you're like, I don't know everything, and I'm really willing to be challenged and to be told I'm wrong. And also I'm willing to claim the truth that I happen at the level of clarity I have right now. So if you're someone who's listening, sitting here and being like, I don't know anything, or I'm not sure, I hear I don't know so much from my clients, like write down all the ways you do know, like write down your damn credentials, lady. Write down all the successes you've had. I think sometimes we have amnesia to our greatness and our superpowers. And I think for women, again, that plays into that confidence conversation. But we really have to, I'm talking to myself here, we really have to claim our capability and our worth and our value. And I think why women in particular are so wonderful at this is because we're so willing to be wrong. We're so willing to be like, and if you prove me wrong, or if I learn something new, I'm going to edit. I think more of the, again, huge stereotypes of masculine energy is like, I can't be wrong.
Right.
But I think for us, it's like, let me just claim what I have and then I'll edit along the way. But if we're not claiming until we're perfect, or we've got the 50th degree or whatever, like the world is missing your work, and we do not have time for that.
No.
No, like we really don't.
I'm going to leave it right there. I think that's a really good ending point.
Drop
And
the
drop the mic
unbreakable
again.
mics.
So many mic drops. I think that's the title of this episode. What? Sarah mic drops all episode long. So join us.
Join us. It's a party.
Totally. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm very thankful for our, yes, and I'm very thankful for our new friendship. I'm excited to see what's next for you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. And thank you for stepping into your someday, creating this podcast as a place for us to just be real and have messy conversations. I have to tell you, this is my favorite podcast I've ever done. And I set an intention coming into it of like, I'm just going to be Sarah the person. Like, I'm going to take down all my professional bullshit things I think I have to be or do or say. And it was so lovely to be in that kind of a conversation with you. And I know the only reason I felt okay to do that is because I know that that was your intention. And I know so many people listening to this are benefiting from real talk. So thank you for doing your own work to create this space. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.